And finally, I am thrilled to end the day with a special conversation between Werner Vogels, the Chief Technology Officer for Amazon, and Kimberly Bryant, founder and CEO of Black Girls Code, to discuss the importance of awareness, accountability, and action to help grow the number of women of color working in technology.
Thank you, Kimberly, for joining us today. I'm very excited to be able to talk to you. I think maybe Corona still has the headlines, but I think some of the things that have happened in the past 6 months have also shined a light on a lot of other things, and especially when it comes to Black Lives Matters, but also sort of the education opportunities that everyone has, so the differences in educational opportunities. And I think you with Black Girls Code have made a significant difference. So we would love to hear from you about sort of, first of all, why did you start this in the first place? But also hearing about sort of your experiences, because I think we can learn a lot from the experiences that you had. So how did this all get started?
Well, that's a great question. Thank you for having this conversation with me, Werner. I started Black Girls Code, I would say almost 10 years ago now, here in the Bay Area. This is where I am today, and in my office alone due to COVID. But I started in San Francisco. We're in Oakland now, but it was really a bit of I would say, a passion project for me. My daughter, Kai, was going into middle school at that time, and she had been around me and throughout my career. Take your daughter to work day. She'd seen me working and knew I was an engineer, but wasn't really interested in what I did, but she was interested in technology. She was a computer geek, and she was into gaming, and I saw that she had an interest in learning more about gaming. And I was like, well, you can create these things. And she was like, well, I just want to test them and get all the games for free. I was like, no, you should learn how to make these things. And we went to first summer camp. And that experience was really transformative for her, because she learned how to make her first platformer game, and she then wanted to be a computer game designer. And as I was really looking for ways to keep her involved, I wasn't finding a lot of things that had girls in the classes. And this is like, we live in the Bay Area. Like, I could probably see Twitter from my house, and there's Google's down in Mountain View, then Amazon, all of the companies, including yourself, but like, everyone is around us. But in this tech hub, I was finding that those classroom opportunities for her were not very diverse. And I was concerned about that from the standpoint that she was at such a tender age, if you will, in middle school. And I wanted her to really, find a way to create community around something that she was passionate about and that she loved. And I wanted her to find other folks and other girls in particular, like herself, that were like the same things and like the game. And I realized that I would maybe have to create it. I didn't necessarily want to create a nonprofit. I that wasn't on my life plan, but I thought, maybe if I did this, after school opportunity with a few of Kai and a few of her friends, maybe I'd see if it would stick and if she would like it. And it really started from that thesis, is trying to find a way to build community for my daughter, and then saw that it was really something that the community here in San Francisco needed, and then many other communities as well.
Okay. Is it, were your experiences pure gender related, or also color or maybe other factors?
I think it was both race and gender. I know it was both race and gender. We did this fantastic summer program that she did down at Stanford called ID Tech. She did an ID Tech summer campus summer camp. She stayed on campus for a week, and when I went to pick her up is when I realized the lack of diversity in the classroom. So they had about 35, 30 students or so. And in that classroom, it was just boys primarily and a handful, sprinkling of girls. But Kai was the only Black student. And I think she was even the only student of color. And that was somewhat shocking to me in ways. It was shocking to me. That's not a very diverse part of the Bay Area, but it was also shocking, I think, in terms of I just thought that more students of color needed to have that opportunity because I saw how much of an impact it had on Kai. The class was very expensive. And, I recognized the privilege that even I had as a woman, working here in the Bay Area with an engineering background. I could give Kai access to opportunities that some other young Black kids in Oakland may not have because their parents wouldn't be able to afford it. And so I was really driven by that. That's the thing that haunted me. I think that's a great question because that's the thing that haunted me. Because even as a Black woman myself, I recognized that even I, had certain privilege. I had certain privilege in terms of the access that I could give my child based on the opportunities and the income and the job that I had. And I knew that wasn't the case necessarily for other Black girls like Kai. And that's what really drove me to actually create the nonprofit, is because I was like, yeah, I could keep bringing Kai back to this summer camp. I could even, if I really want her to have a friend, I could probably pay for a couple of friends too. But that's a handful of folks. And there's a lot of Black girls who were like me, who, if it was at my time when I was growing up, I wouldn't have been able to go to a camp like that. And that's what really drove me to stop doing and focus on building this.
Do you think that's more of a West Coast thing? Because I when I travel to DC, for example, I meet a lot of Black engineers. Way more Black engineers, whether they're female or male, than I would ever see on the West Coast. Is there something in the culture that sort of, or is it just because Black colleges and other thing are way more sort of prevalent on the East Coast versus West Coast? Or is there something again, something that there's a barrier?
You're spot on. So we've been in the Bay Area. I've lived in the Bay Area for a little over 15 years now, and I've always lived in the city. I lived in San Fran. And one of the things that I recognized when I moved there is that the city doesn't have a large Black population. So maybe 2.5% now, when it did used to have a much larger population. So the Bay Area as a whole doesn't have a heavy population and demographics for African Americans. If they are, they're in the East Bay, but they have not been prevalent in the community for quite some time. The cost of living is extremely high. Black families moved out or they moved farther out as gentrification and things like that started to happen within the community. So they're just not here. We even see this in our chapters now. So when we started out, we were right here in San Fran and then working in Oakland, Bay Area, parts around Bay Area. But in the middle of 2012, when we started to create these chapters and chapter models, we took BGC on the road. And I remember vividly the first time we did a workshop in Atlanta, then when we did one in New York, then DC, we had all 50 Black engineers. My mind was blown. I was like, are you kidding me? There were like 50 Black engineers in a room in New York at that very first workshop. And it was a beautiful sight for me to see because our girls did not have that in the Bay Area. Same thing in DC, same thing in Atlanta. So even today, those are actually some of our larger chapters. And they just also happen to have more Black and brown engineers as well.
Okay, so in the earlier days, it must have been really hard for you to find the right mentoring because you want to have role models. Yeah, and it's sort of a chicken and egg, you know. If there aren't role models, if you're the only role model, but you're the mom, so that doesn't really work that well. But you know, but so how did you find your mentors?
So luckily, for me, I absolutely believe in serendipity. As I mentioned, I wasn't trying to start a nonprofit, but I was trying to leave my biotech job and start a startup of some type in health tech. I didn't have a specific thing I wanted to build. I just knew I wanted to be a startup and I wanted to do something health tech related. And so I had started to really navigate and really network in lots of communities of female engineers. So I was participating in an organization called Women 2.0. I was participating in a Ruby network for women. I was trying to learn how to do Ruby and Rails. And I was also a part in attending Women Who Code meetings. And so when I was ready to do that first pilot, I tapped right into that network. So all of those women that I met in my Ruby classes, Women 2.0 conferences, those are the folks that I reached out to. And those are the folks who are my very first mentors. I also had attended some events for Code for America, and I met one of the fellows that they had in San Francisco for that summer. And I literally recruited him to be on my core team. And that is how we really started to build out a lot of the curriculum. So I tapped right into the communities of women, particularly women who were doing coding, teaching coding in the Bay Area. And that's how we were able to get our very first mentors.
Okay, cool. So can you tell us a little bit about, so if girls come to you have a very broad age range that you're serving. So if girls come to you, so what happens? You know, what are sort of the intake process, but what are sort of the first steps that these girls do?
Well, we started back in the early days, if you will, with, really teaching them the basics of like what even computer science and computer programming was. So from our very first pilot and even our very first initial workshops, we found that girls were coming into the classroom or coming into the workshop and not really knowing what they were there to do. So this was this was 2011. And coding, it was just becoming part of the I would say the public narrative, if you will. Learning the code was just starting to kind of infiltrate school-based learning. So, they maybe had been exposed to a little Scratch networking or something like that in school, but not most. So we did the very basics, which, bringing girls into this community, teaching them about the computer, teaching them what computer science was, and teaching them how to just build a basic website. So our very first workshops, and we still do this workshop today, was like build a web page in a day. And we were lucky that we were able to tap into like some free tools, like Mozilla was one of the tools that we used in the early days to help us kind of teach them about computer programming and how to do web development. And then we expanded from there. So that was the key, is like really getting them to see something on the page that they designed, learn how to go. They already kind of knew how to surf the web. So like going to the web, surfing and find a picture and then putting some words on it. And that was sort of the light bulb moment for most of those girls. And that was the hook, was really getting them to create something very quickly that was an expression of themselves. And then they would go even deeper and want to learn, well, how do I make the page a different color? How do I put a video on it? How do I do these things? And that's really how we kept the girls coming back for more.
Yeah. I always thought that being a software engineer is the most creative job in the world, because every day you go to work and you get the chance to create something new.
Absolutely.
Or to tinker or to do other fun things. Yeah. So no, I think it is. Most people think it's a nerdy, stupid kind of back office job. No, it's creative. And I think that should be young people should really latch on to that, because they can, all the things they normally see on whether it's the apps or whether it's the website, they can try those skills.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally agree, because when one of my daughter's passions then and still today, like, she's an artist. So like, she draws all the time. She writes, she's a great writer. Like, she really is an artist. So I think some folks would think like this is anti, like it's anti being an artist, being a coder, but it's not, because she's looking at a blank screen and she has to pull all of those creative juices like right into whatever she's going to create. So like, I've seen her code even now, and like, she'll stare at the screen at times, but that's part of like that creative process of like tapping in and then building something. And it's very creative as a profession.
Okay. Well, you educated someone to at least have a good, decent technical build. I ended up with 2 daughters who are actresses.
Mm-hmm.
Not much technology there. So I'm really curious about. So before Amazon, I was an academic. And one of the things I noticed is that whenever we either had, let's say, other genders or other races in our classes, those people would work 5 times as hard as everybody else. Yeah, they had to overcome so many barriers. And if they indeed made it to the end, that would be, I mean, I would be the first one to hire these people, because they've overcome so much. Is that something that you see as well, that there is so much more focus and attention from these girls than what you would normally see?
I don't know if I would say that it was necessarily more focus and attention. I think that for me, I think my personal experience as a woman of color, a Black woman that has a degree in electrical engineering, is that I had to work really, really hard. And, when I came to college, I came from college where I was in the top 10% or maybe one, I don't know, it's the top percent of my class. But no, that engineering was foreign to me. Like, computer science was foreign to me. And I did not have, a really, I didn't have a community. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have any of that. Like, I had to learn it on my own. And that is one of the things that drove me to work so very hard. Like, I worked so hard to get that degree. And it was because I didn't have a lot of the, basic foundational background or exposure before I got to college. So it was like a foreign territory for me. Everything was new. And so that really drove me to work hard. And that's what I see in lots of Black students that end up in university and a STEM career and doing a degree, is that like, we oftentimes don't have those communities, and we certainly don't often have the foundation or this exposure previously to some of these things we're being asked to learn. And it's difficult to do that. And that's what I think drives many of us to really push so hard. It has gotten better, but it's not good, because students shouldn't have to wait until high school to do their first computer programming class. And I think, it's even deeper than that, because I found for my daughter and some students and other students within our program, they sometimes even don't have the foundational math skills that they need to be a computer scientist. I remember a class, we were doing a workshop on game development, and the girls were to the point where they had to build their game board. And as we were talking to them, and the mentors were working with them and how to map out this game board, how to make their sprite move across the game board, they realized that, like, they were using algebra. And they were like, oh, so this is what the teacher was trying to teach me in her class? I'm like, yes. That's why you need to know your algebra. This is why you need to know geometry. This is why those math skills are important. And I find that in Black communities and for students, also Latino students, they are not getting that foundational math training at an early enough stage in their career so that they can matriculate and be able to go into these more rigorous STEM careers, because they have to be able to get through those things like pre-calc and calc by the time they graduate. And our students are not getting that. So I think all of these pieces in the educational system are important, and our kids are not getting that on an equitable basis.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you target girls from, is it 7 to 17? I understand. So what happens when they're 17? I mean, what is the outcome that you're looking for? Is it not just excitement and being sort of having some skills, but is there another outcome that you're looking for? Like,
So
do you expect them to go to college and get a computer science degree, or maybe get psychology and know how to deal with data?
yes. So I would say on my team, like I'm the diehard STEM nerd in the room. Like I'm trying, and I tell the team quite often, like I'm trying to create full stack developers. And they're like, what are you talking about? So I'm like, I'm trying to create a full stack developer. So my theory of change is that the girls will be capable of being a full stack developer. That is the prototype that I am trying to create. Now, that being said, we have students that graduate, if you will, from Black Girls Code after they leave high school. And I would say about half of them go into a computer science field. They either major or minor in computer science. But then there are other girls that may actually go into another STEM career. So we have students that are going into aerospace engineer, lots of students that go into medicine, either going into pre-med or looking to become a nurse. And then they still, or maybe even some that may be more liberal arts where they're going into the legal profession, but they want to be tapped in still to technology. So we've seen a bit of a variance in terms of where our girls go. So like ideally, I am trying to create computer science graduates. But if I can, as you mentioned, just at least have girls that are competent in computer science, that may go into data, they may go into design field, they may become something that is in artificial intelligence. All of that is something that I'm aspiring to, so that they have that piece of knowledge in their toolkit, if you will, so they can tap into it in whatever career field they choose.
Yeah. It's a fascinating story, because I also believe that most other disciplines will become way more digital, way more reliant on data. And I just make the joke about psychology. In essence, psychologists, definitely when they're in training, need to learn how to look at data and collect data and think about it. It's an amazing story. Things must have changed in the past 6 months. Yeah, I think mentally a very important part for me, at least, always was that I would be in the same room with the student. Yeah, look over her shoulder and sort of give some indications. That's no longer happening.
Right.
So how did you guys adapt to that?
Well, when we decided in middle of March, I think, that we would have to, like many people, here in the US and around the world, go into quarantine. We had classes and workshops planned throughout the rest of the year, and we reluctantly decided we knew we had to take those classes off the calendar. So we postponed things initially. And then we took our staff remote, and we kind of just tried to figure out how to survive. I was like, how to survive for that first month. I think it was around April, the beginning of April, we realized that we couldn't even get anyone to have a conversation with us about doing those workshops or rescheduling those workshops, like to now, like an October, September date. And now we see why, we're still dealing with the impact of COVID. So if we wanted to continue to engage, we had to go virtual. So we really dove in like head first and tried to figure out how to take those workshops or classes we normally would do in person and adapt them to a virtual delivery model. And we started to do our very first workshops. we were somewhat blown away by the response. Like, I think the very first one that we did virtual class, we probably had about 1,000 people on a Zoom call. And these were not just folks from our existing chapters. These are folks from all over the world. There are people from Africa on the call, people from Jamaica on the call. There's a tiny island, South Pacific. I forgot what the name of the island was. We were looking at the map recently. Someone from there was on the call. I mean, it was phenomenal that folks from all over the world were tapping into these classes. So it expanded our reach exponentially. And then we started to continue to do these workshops. And then we even took our summer programs virtual in June. And we started to really get good at that. However, one of the things we recognized, especially during the summer when we had longer workshops, which were more intensive, is that we were missing that element, just what you said, of being able to look over the student's shoulder, or the students being able to interact with each other. Like, we can do that on a Zoom. And we were like, this isn't working, because a key element of teaching is like, we got to talk to the kids, and like the kids got to talk to each other. And so it's been challenging. I mean, I have to be honest, it's been challenging for us to figure out how to make what we do in a classroom translate to doing something virtually. And we've been trying many things. Like, we've been using, tools to do breakout rooms where we have a smaller group of students. We've been figuring out how to send some activities that they can do actually offline, but there's an element that's still missing. And I think we recognized then is like, this is why when we had thought about going virtual or doing things virtually years ago, we're like, yeah, we can't go fully virtual because we've missed that piece of that human interaction. Yeah.
But no choice.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, we don't have a choice. I mean, we have to figure it out. I think I do still think that virtual learning is part of our future. Like, it's never going back to normal. So I think the challenge for educators that are trying to teach not just computer science, but any rigorous type of curriculum is to figure out how we could either use hybrid models or how can we really harness other tools and the teaching rubric and processes that we do to be as effective as we can with our students.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting. So we run these TV series, Now Go Build, and one of the ones that I interviewed when I was still here in Amsterdam is a company called Poland that's called Brainly. And what they do is just facilitate peer-to-peer interactions. So student X has student Y has a question, and what I really saw, what they saw was there's a massive explosion because students can no longer ask their mentors or they're not around, but they can ask each other. And so, yeah, I'm with you. I think, whenever if this ever goes over, then we may still latch on to our tools. I do think we need better tools though.
Yes.
I think we need to look at sort of, indeed, in the interaction style. Until now, there just has been teleconferencing, but that's not how education works. And so I think there's tons of opportunities for us, as this is an opportunity to rethink education, especially in the context of where we are. So, and I think smaller groups that provide great mentoring will play an increasingly important role in all of. Sorry, that was my rant for a moment.
No, I agree. I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Coming back to the big company part, what are the kind of things that we could be doing as, after all, I represent a big company here. Mm-hmm. So what are the kind of things that we could be doing to sort of improve the pipeline, basically? Yeah, what are the kind of things that we could be doing to sort of help out here?
Yeah, that There's a few things that I would say. I think one of the things that I remember when we first started back in 2011, 2012, and when we would talk to companies, or what we saw is that companies were interested in students like in high school. Like they were interested in programs like with students that were in high school. Like we started seven, they're not ready yet. And they
Mhm.
would focus a lot of attention there, either high school, college. But to create a really diverse pipeline, you have to start much earlier. Back in 2011, 2012, companies were not as open to that conversation. They are more open now, but I think we're just starting to scratch the surface. So I think really investing in programs like BGC and others that starts to teach students quite early about computer science. Because if you look at underrepresented communities, if you wait to high school, the numbers dwindle. We even see that in our programs, 7, 8, 9, maybe even for us, 10 to 12 is the sweet spot. But
Okay.
at that higher age range, the number of students even in our community, it drastically decreases. So I think we all should focus on getting students engaged and comfortable, not just engaged, but just comfortable with technology as early, and not just using it, being able to manipulate it as early as we possibly can, so that
Yeah.
it's not a foreign concept by the time they're in high school. I think also companies need to really support educational institutions, public education, either by giving them tools so that they can teach programming, sending in mentors to help teach computer science. Computer science teachers are always lacking in schools, they don't have enough. Supporting schools so that they can actually teach these classes, so that they can build a broadband network so that students can work, so that students can have access to the equipment, especially in the virtual world. We don't have enough, like most students, I don't want to say most, many students don't have access to equipment to even learn to do coding, especially if they're virtual. So all of those things are necessary, on the public education side to really increase the capacity of your student or your future pipeline of employees or potential employees. I think also then on the flip side is really focusing on your own internal culture so that those students that we feed to companies actually stay. They find that those companies are welcoming. There's a culture that they want to stay and grow and build their careers in. Because I think this concept of a revolving door, it does not make the job easier for those on like myself and BGC that are feeding and building this funnel. We need to be able to pass this pipeline on to places where they can actually build their skill sets, grow further in their careers, and then start to become these leaders and tech leaders and thought leaders that we're trying to build now.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. You mentioned something earlier when we talked about virtual, that there were people from other parts of the world joining.
Mhm.
So how did that? I mean, I can imagine that you have a very good understanding of the American educational system and sort of the things that happen there. How did this work to go global? Is that something you just push out to different chapters, or is this top-down guidelines, or what are you guys doing there?
We didn't really do anything intentional, and so in the before time, I'll call it that. In the before time, we had one international chapter, we still do, in Johannesburg, South Africa. We started that chapter because one of our partners, really early partners, a consultancy called ThoughtWorks here in the Bay Area, they had a office in Joburg. We had worked very closely with them. And so they were like, can we bring BGC to Joburg? We said yes. And that's how that chapter really came to be. It wasn't like, let's go to Joburg. We were like, we're working with this partner. Let's do this in Joburg. But for the virtual classes, we did not specifically market to other places. People found us either on the web when we were just posting information about the classes, on social media. They found out, they registered for the classes, and that's kind of how it happened. We were surprised ourselves. Like, we did not anticipate this overwhelming response, and we certainly didn't, expect to see folks chiming in from, a tiny island in Southeast Asia. So it was an unexpected experience for us. But now I think we're looking at it much differently. So now we're like, okay, if we will be doing virtual from now until forever, how can we be more intentional? Because now that opens the boundaries for us. I'll share one tidbit. Like, last year, we were doing our numbers and reviewing our numbers to present to our board, and we found that when we did workshop for the whole year last year, we reached about 5,500 or so students. That's for a whole year. But when we went virtual this year and we looked at our numbers, we were calculating the number of participants. We reached about 7,000 students in May. Uh, and that was just because we went virtual. And we were like, wait a minute, like, we're in May and we've reached well over thousands over the number of students that we did in person. Like, there's no way we can go back to just being an in-person organization. And we started to do some work with some graduate students and really start to dig into the data, if you will. As you said, we were digging into the data. And we recognize, because we've always had this goal of, like, we want to reach 1 million girls by 2040. So we've known for a few years that if we were just going to be doing these classes in person, we could probably make that goal, but it'd be difficult. Like, it's a lot of work. When we looked at the data and we really start to crunch the numbers with the students and look at the data from the standpoint of doing virtual, as well as this in-person model, so a hybrid, they're like, oh, well, you will definitely reach this goal because you have the capacity now to reach 20,000 girls in a year. Then the next year you can hit 30,000, 40, 50, etc. This is how you hit and you reach 1 million girls, is utilizing this virtual platform. So for us, this year has been transformational because it was like, now we can actually hit that big, hairy, audacious goal that, was just a good talking point before, but now it's something that we can actually reach. So for us, the virtual platform and the virtual delivery is something that helps us to reach students all over the world in a way we never would have been before.
Yeah, and it's really important. I spent a lot of time in Africa in the past years, and it's a major recruiting area for us because the students that are coming out of, whether it's computer science or anything or STEM, are well educated. And as such, I think there's a massive opportunity in Africa to really get sort of the students educated, because this is where their future jobs are going to be. Yeah, I mean, everybody's going to be accessing things through digital services. And so definitely, I think we should look at the number of areas around the world where I think there's great potential if we only could get them started. Yeah. And I think you guys are doing an amazing job. I'm getting a time sort of thingy here. Thank you very much for talking to us, Kimberly. I, however, have one last question for you. What was the last line of code that you wrote?
Oh my gosh.
Pick the language.
The last line of code I wrote was absolutely something Ruby. Absolutely Ruby. Like, that's the language that I personally love. Absolutely.
Do you like Rails as well?
I do. I do. I mean, like, you can't really use Ruby effectively without using Rails. And I that is absolutely the last line of code that I personally wrote myself, other than maybe some basic HTML, CSS when I was pilling around. but definitely Rails and Ruby, and I love that language. And it's funny because when I started BGC, I was adamant, like, we're teaching them Ruby and we're teaching them Rails, and we still haven't taught them Ruby. So that could be aspirational.
No, things change hard in our world as well. I mean, languages like Go and Rust and Scala didn't even exist 10
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. You have a big job. Do you set time aside still to do technical stuff, just secretly in the corner, or just to keep yourself going?
No, I don't have time. I don't have time. I just don't have time. I wish. I actually wish I do, because I was really, was passionate about getting back. When I was in college, I learned Fortran and Pascal. So I didn't use any contemporary languages for most of my career, because I was electrical engineer, and I didn't go the coding route. I went into power engineering. So like I was in the factory doing networking and doing, electronics. I wasn't doing coding. And so when I rediscovered computer science, late in my career, I fell in love with, just this application design. And when I started BGC, I started to not focus on that as much. So I miss that piece of learning. So hopefully one day I'll get back to it.
Okay. So, Kimberly, thanks a million. My last line of code was actually in Rust. So there was these 100 days of code kind of challenge when we all got stuck. And I thought, I should learn something. It was fun. Okay.
I love it.
Kimberly, thank you. Thanks a million for talking to us. Congratulations on all the work that you've done. And please keep doing this, and we'll try to help you as much as possible.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Peace out. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Kimberly and Werner. With that, we've reached the end of this year's Imagine Nonprofit Conference. We hope you emerged with some insights and ideas from our distinguished presenters. Please send your questions and engage with us. We are here to be a resource to you. Here's to navigating the storm together.